now that this book is finally out, I can post my spoiler-filled review. But first, I just want to propose a toast to Sarah Kate for writing undoubtedly one of my favorite books of the year, and it's only March, but also maybe one of my top 5, probably top 3, honestly, favorite books of all time. Cheers, bitch! First off, right out of the gate, if I could give this book 100 stars, I would. This book appealed to me in so many different ways and honestly felt tailor-made for like my specific schminks. I mean, IRL, I probably wouldn't date a man who's 56. That's the age gap. She's 22. He's 56. But only because I don't want to be like burying my partner when I'm 45. But I digress. For the book, it was beautiful. Let's talk about everything that happened. So this book starts out with Ronan 9 years in the past when the Salacious Player Club was just an idea. And he's in the process of reading an email from Emerson Grant about a potential business opportunity. And while he's reading this email, this woman walks into his office who is Daisy's mom. Now, Daisy is our female lead. She's a kid at this point, and her parents are divorced. So she was spending the summer with her dad, and her mom was traveling for work, was in California, and had this 3-month whirlwind romance with Ronan. And they actually totally fell in love. Daisy's mom just felt like Ronan's lifestyle wasn't going to be able to be adaptable to like a family life, and she had her daughter to think about and was obviously never going to choose a man over her child. She didn't even care that he was a billionaire and was like, okay, if this has to end, at least let me like set you up financially for life. That's part of who he is. He loves to take care of people, especially the people he cares about. But her whole deal was like, I love you for free. That's not what I want. And so as a parting gift, he said, okay, well, at least let me write a check for your daughter. You can put it into an account, so when she turns 18, it will have accrued value, and she will be set up financially for at least a really long time. He's like, let me at least do this for her because I love you so much. She accepts the check, they part ways, and then to distract himself, he sort of responds right away to Emerson Grant's email. Present day, Daisy is a bartender at the Salacious Players Club. Her mom passed of breast cancer like right around the time she turned 18. So she was becoming an adult, settling all the assets, and she came across this account that was in her name that had $1 million in it from a man called Ronan Cade. And no one in her family knew who that was. So after a few years of like not really grieving, but not really pursuing her dreams, she decided to pack up her life, move into a van, travel around the United States, and try to find answers about this Ronan dude. So she basically stalks him and keeps an eye on him when he happens to be at the club. It just so happens to be auction night, and Gio, one of the other bartenders and one of her really good friends, kind of makes a bet with her because there's this blonde and she sees Ronan and it seems like the kind of girl Ronan would go for. So she tells him, I bet he's going to win that girl in the auction. And he says, I don't know if that's going to happen. So she says, if I win, you have to take me to that piano bar that I love so much. That's one of her passions, music, writing songs. She's a great musician, has just never pursued it. He says, okay, I'll take that bet. But if you lose, you have to put yourself on the chopping block for auction. She's been studying Ronan's patterns for a while now and feels very confident in her choice, so she says, deal. What she doesn't know, though, is that Ronan is not there tonight for companionship. He's just looking for distraction to be around people because it is the anniversary of the death of his wife and son. He had a child with his first wife, and they both died in a car accident. So he's just there to, like, not be at home. He notices that Daisy keeps looking at him, and after she loses the bet and he doesn't bet on that woman, he kind of ends up overhearing like, oh, there was this bet going on and now she's got to pay up. So she ends up like the last person up for auction, and he takes pity on her and gets in this bidding war with this other man there and ends up buying an hour of her time for $100,000. But like he said, he's not really in the mood for sexual escapades, and basically says, hey, can we take a rain check? But has no intention of actually taking a rain check. Can you imagine being so rich that 100 G's just like water under the bridge? So like I said, Daisy is living out of her van. She has it parked in some lot close to the club. Ronan struggles with like not sleeping very well at night, so he decides to go on a walk at 2 a.m, and he walks into like this gas station like convenience store, And he knows the teller and everything because he's like a nice guy. And who walks in but Daisy? And he's like, what are you doing here by yourself at 2 a.m? And she says, they let me have hot water for free here for my chamomile tea. It helps me sleep. And she's like, wait, I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm a grown woman. She grabs her water, goes back to her van. He like follows her, sees her getting into the van, and is like, oh, hell no. He literally throws her over his shoulder, caveman style, and is like, I'm taking her back to my place. But then is like, I could get arrested for that. So he puts her down and says, I do not want you sleeping in your van. Please come stay back at my place. It's not safe for you. And after some struggling back and forth because she's stubborn, she finally gives in because it's like freezing outside. And van life is not that glamorous. So something you need to know about Ronan is he is a pleasure dom and a daddy, but not in the sense of like age play. He just craves that caretaker role and that control over someone's good feelings. He craves to be needed. So straight off the bat, he sees Daisy. They already kind of have this type of chemistry, and he sees a need that he can fill and is happy to do so. So even though Daisy has been working at the club for a long time, she actually almost never goes to like the other side of the curtain area. She stays in like the general, like the lobby type bar area. She doesn't actually witness a lot of the rinky stuff going on most of the time. But one night they're short-staffed and they have to send her up to like the VIP lounge, which is where all the stuff is going on, all out in the open. When Cade finds out, he's not that happy. He likes that she's innocent and like not corrupted, and kind of like feels this need to keep her that way. He's possessive and we love it. He feels the need to be there, keeping his eyes on her during her shifts. After a few days of living at Ronan's place, they're having conversation, they're getting to know each other better. He finds out that she's never been to Paris, and he's like, let's just go. And she's like, ha ha ha. Very funny. He's like, no, like I have a house there. Let's just go like tomorrow. All of a sudden they're off to Paris on his private jet. She's starting to feel the lines blur a little bit because she really enjoys spending time with him. She's really attracted to him and kind of wants to pursue something with him. But at the same time, there's all that guilt of like knowing that he probably was connected to her mother in some way and that she stalked him. But they've totally had a conversation where he's like, let me take care of you. We get like a flirty flight attendant who thinks that she's his daughter. And she's like, no. And so she makes a joke like, daddy. And he kind of wigs out because he likes it far too much. He's like, don't call me that. She's like, why? Because you like it? And he says, yeah. Puts her on his lap and like rubs her all over his heart. But then pulls the whole like, but our relationship isn't like that. Cade hasn't really been in a romantic relationship, I think, since her mom. And when he gets into a dom-sub dynamic with someone, it's usually not with like those types of emotions involved. And so he separates them. He's like, I care about you too much to want to be physical with you in this way. And she's like, how can you care about me but not want me in that way? The secret is he does. So they get to Paris. He's showing her around. They're having an amazing time. And he gets a call from one of his business partners who owns a sex club in Paris called L'Amour. She's like, ooh, I definitely want to go. Please take me. He says, absolutely not. There's like a back and forth a little bit because he's like, it's different than Salacious. There's not as many boundaries. Even if people think you belong to me, they're still going to try to proposition you. But eventually he caves because she's like, I'll be good. I'll stay by your side the entire time. I promise. They get there and she's like, okay, what's the game plan? What do we do if like someone tries to come on to me? And he's like, you basically tell them that your daddy said no. So they go inside and his business partner all over Daisy, like whispering sweet nothings in her ear, caressing her face, talking about what a beautiful flower she is. And that's when Ronan cracks and realizes he doesn't want anyone else to have his hands on her. Before they leave, he shows her this part of the club that was kind of his design that was inspired by museums, where it's like rooms that are completely open on one side so that you can see what's going on inside the space. And she definitely gets a little bit curious about a dom and a sub engaging in some impact play. She asks him if that's something that he ever does with his subs, and he's like, no, I'm not really into like hurting people in that way because he's such a softie. He likes to torture his subs by pushing them past their limits of pleasure. Over and over and over again. So they go back to his apartment, and mind you, they have actually been sharing a bed for the past few nights. Just sleeping, but when she beelines for the guest room, he's like, where are you going? She's like, damn, Roman, we were just at the club. I'm a little high-strung. I need to relieve myself. Don't you? He's shocked into silence and is like, okay, sorry, go. But then he can't stop thinking about her taking care of herself in the room next door. So he bursts in the room and offers up his phalanges instead. So after he diddles her twiddle under the sheets, she owes harder than she ever has, and they're basically both ruined. She tries to reciprocate. He says, no, let me just hold you, baby girl. At this point, he's realizing he hasn't really craved or cared about someone this intensely, like, ever. And they spend the rest of their time in Paris just doing romantic things. He takes her on a picnic in front of the Eiffel Tower, like as the sun is setting so that they can see the lights come on and become all sparkly, because that was something she really wanted to do. And he starts touching her under the picnic blanket. While she's sitting in his lap, he asks her to open her eyes right as she owes. The lights come on. The heavens open up. That scene was so good. That's a rent-free one right there, and may now be on my bucket list. So they fly home and she says, I definitely want to continue this. He says, I agree. And she proposes that she actually become his like official sub. He's very into the idea, but she's also very green in like the schmink world and he wants to ease her into it. She obviously still works at the club and they decide maybe we're not going to like announce our relationship right away. And that lasts 0.2 seconds because her first shift lasts no time at all before he's coming in saying, I missed you, and like getting his hands all up on her and kissing her. I loved how just into each other they were. Once when she's working in the VIP room, he goes up there and orders a drink, and when she brings it over, he makes her sit on his lap and he diddles again. He loves to diddle. And then as soon as she owes, he says, right after your shift, meet me in my private room. Because he's an investor, him and Eden, they have private rooms on like the top floor. And that's where they have their first session, if you will, together as like true DS. It's amazing, mind-blowing, synonyms. And the more time they spend together, the harder they're falling for each other. Ronan and Eden are actually like best friends. I actually hope that the next book is about Eden because they set up a lot of her backstory and I just feel like there's so much potential there. And she's been in every single book. Eden needs a book. And she has a chat with Daisy just to make sure that her intentions are good with Ronan. She's not there for the money or anything else. And it's true, she's not there for the money. And she says, I would love Ronan even if he didn't have a penny to his name. But she actually hasn't told Ronan that she loves him yet. So a bit of a jump. At one point, Daisy is kind of like bratting out a little bit. And Ronan, whoosh, I love a good spank scene. And that's like kind of the most comfortable he is with impact play. And she really liked it and wanted to explore more. And Ronan talks about how him and Eden have like shared subs before. Like they've never slept together, but they have played together. And he says, I trust Eden more than anyone in this world. So if that's something you want to explore, we can talk to her about maybe her doing some of the stuff that I'm not comfortable with. I would obviously be there. He doesn't want to share her. Like I said, he is very possessive. He's very needy and wants to be needed. But not only that, Daisy's not just another sub. She's like, at this point, the love of his life. So they set up a session with Madame Eden. They go to her private room. And this was a scene in the book that, although didn't take away from how much I loved it, it was my least favorite part. And it surprisingly had nothing to do with the impact play. I just felt so bad for Ronan this whole time because it's just something that he's not comfortable with, but he knows that it's something that she was curious about and wanted and to some extent felt like she needed. And because he's a daddy, he wants to be everything she needs and he wants to be able to fulfill every need that she has. And he just felt so bad this whole session watching Eden kind of have her way with her. Not really have her way, like at one point she tried to get Ronan involved. Like he was just kind of a spectator there to like praise and make Daisy feel comfortable. Towards the end, Eden gives Ronan the whip and is sort of encouraging him to participate so that they can learn to eventually maybe do this without her help and guidance. And he's like a pleasure dom, so he's getting so conflicted because he knows that she's enjoying it, but it like hurts him to hurt her. And she's like totally loving it. And at one point while he's Eden decides to eat her kitty and I was like, Eden, no! Ronan wasn't happy about it. He's not into sharing her in that way with other people. So as soon as she owes, he takes her down from her restraints, bends her over a chair or something like that, and takes her, makes her his again, and kind of is trying to like drive home the point that like, despite this session, she does belong to him. And I just felt bad for how bad he felt. And Daisy kind of felt like she needed that session. It was very therapeutic because she really has not dealt with the grief of her mom's death and holding an immense amount of guilt about this truth that she hasn't told Ronan yet. When they were in Paris, he kind of opened up about this woman that he met these years ago, and she was like, that was definitely my mom. Good to know. I mean, she obviously didn't tell him that, but it like confirmed her suspicions. After that night, they just feel very connected. It definitely like solidified their feelings for each other. And since Daddy Ronan has no chill, he asks her to marry him. And she says yes. And one of her biggest questions was like, as long as you're not asking me because you just want to take care of me, like it has to be because you love me. And he's like, I'm like so obsessed with you. So in like the whirlwind process of like getting all of his financials and affairs together to marry Daisy, he had like drafted up an email to send to a private investigator just to like make sure that she didn't have any skeletons in her closet and things like that. But then he felt kind of guilty about it and was like, you know what? No, I trust Daisy. I have to just trust that she loves me and that she's told me everything that's important. And so then he doesn't send it. I was like, oh, thank God. I'm so glad he didn't send it. But then that lasts like only a few chapters before he's like in his office again and opens up his computer. And it turns out that the draft sent, and it was like, it had popped up as soon as he opened his laptop. And was like, you know what? I'm just going to send it. It's like not a big deal. It's just to confirm the trust that I already have for her. But then the private investor gets back to him while he's with Daisy, and he tells him who her parents are. And he's like, oh, and the mother, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he wrote her a check for $1 million 9 years ago. The truth dawns on him. Daisy had so many opportunities to tell him the truth and didn't. He obviously wigs, rightly so. I think anyone would. Daisy's panicking and is like, this doesn't change anything for me. It doesn't have to change. And he's like, this changes everything for me. She grabs all her stuff. She flees the apartment. She is hanging out with Gio the next night and at the piano bar. Gets totally shit-faced. Like worshiping the porcelain throne in the dirty bathroom bar, kind of shit-faced. Gio calls Ronan. He comes in to take her back to his place to take care of her, nurse her back to health. And this is a kind of realization for him. It actually didn't take him very long after thinking about it to realize that he still really loved her, and none of that information actually did change the way he felt. He still really wanted to marry her. But then seeing how drastically and quickly she fell apart after their breakup, she already kind of struggled with taking care of herself independently. She had like intense hypoglycemia where she wouldn't feed herself and her blood sugars would get so low that she would literally like black out and like pass out anywhere she was. And this happened a few times throughout the book, and it really scared Ronan, and it made him be really on top of her about like feeding herself and make sure that she was keeping herself healthy so that didn't happen. But he realized that his desire to be needed and to be her everything came at the cost of like her not learning to be independent and to like take care of herself. So after she sobered up the next day, he told her, yes, I still love you. No, my feelings actually haven't changed for you, but we can't be together. I'm letting you go. You need to work through this grief with your mom. You need to learn to be independent on your own. And I need to work on my issues as well. And it was heartbreaking, but she does it. I think he stays away for like 2 or 3 months. She's living with Gio. She's going to therapy, grief counseling. She's been writing her music, which is something that he really encouraged her to do when they were in Paris together. She has this big performance at the piano bar where it's going to be her first time playing her original music in front of a crowd. And like a bunch of people from the club come to like support her. And obviously Daddy Ronan, because he couldn't stay away. He really was her biggest cheerleader this whole story, and I was feral for it. She sits down at this piano, and once the applause died down, she whispers into the microphone, "Thank you. This first song is called The Highest Bidder." Sobbed instantly. But then it moved on to the next chapter, and I'm like, where's the song, Sarah? We need a song, Sarah. After that night, they talk about all the progress that she's made independently, and she talks about how, thank you so much for giving me this time. You're right, I don't need you anymore, but I want you more than anything. She was so nervous about her performance that she forgot to eat. She ends up passing out. They go to the doctor's office. Surprise pregnancy. He is elated. He's so happy. They get married. 3 years later, they have another baby. And they've moved to Paris. Permanently. This book truly will stick with me. I gave it 1,000,000 out of 5 stars and a 4 chili pepper. Read it.